morning, everyone. So it's a delight to be here. Ted, how you doing?
I'm great, thank you. We'll be doing a little tennis match here.
So we're going to play a little tennis game up here and talk about leadership. And I've got the first serve. And it's really a pleasure to sit here with Ted because, first of all of you may know him from his games. Of course, those are legendary, whether it's Ratchet and Clank or Resistance or his new title that's being featured here. But what you may not know is that Ted's on the board of the Academy. We both serve on that together. And the Academy is very much focused on promoting the true art form of our industry. And that also, and this is really key to the leadership discussion, Ted, is for 10 years in a row, his company has been one of the top 25 small and medium-sized companies to work for in the United States. So when you talk about leadership as an output that we all enjoy, well, it takes a team to make it, and Ted's going to walk us through that. And Ted, I thought it would be best to start if we turn the clock backwards and look back to 2005. The industry is on the ropes and being accused of all sorts of negative things about what's going on with our kids and the content and how it's put in the marketplace. And you volunteered to serve. You said, I'm here, I want to help us defeat those criticisms, which ultimately we did. And I was just curious, what was going through your mind at that time, and what did you learn from it?
I think
we're good. We don't even need these things. Okay,
yeah.
There we go.
So as Mike said, we were definitely under duress. Several states had passed bills or were trying to pass bills that would make selling video games to minors a crime. Mm-hmm. And it was a situation where we were looking at the content we were creating and others around us were creating and saying to ourselves, how could it be possible that you could walk into a store, sell a game to someone, and then the store owner could actually be put in jail for this? And we were shocked at what was happening with our constitutional rights. And so I had the opportunity to participate in some of the defense in these states and then eventually at the Supreme Court level in helping write some of the industry's defense. And for me, what was really gratifying about the process was it forced me to look at what we do, what all of us as creators do, and reevaluate how important our craft is to the world. We are in one of the most, as you know, vibrant, living, evolving media ever invented. And what was happening was people who didn't play games, in particular legislators who didn't play games, were looking at our stuff and saying, this is harmful. I don't know anything about it, but I know it's harmful. And there are people who are telling me that this hurts our kids. So we needed to take a stand and say, you're wrong. This is a medium that is helping the world in many different ways, and here's why. And the last thing I'll say about this was one other reason it was gratifying for me and for the rest of the Insomniacs. Is that it was the first time I personally got to stand up for what I believe America stands for. And in particular, it was defending our First Amendment rights, which I think is absolutely crucial to who we are as Americans and why this country is amazing.
Well, I think that's a great point that will connect up later in our discussion to those First Amendment rights being more and more important even today. So, but I think that's a great contribution you made back then.
Well, it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people who actually did it. And it was wonderful being in the Supreme Court. Actually, I got to go, thanks to the ESA, and watch the arguments. And if you ever have an opportunity to watch a Supreme Court case, it is one of the most entertaining and educational experiences you will ever have. It was incredible. But I want to kind of build on that. I hope that challenge has passed for us. But these challenges never stop coming our way within this industry. So Mike, back to you. What do you think is the next big leadership challenge we're going to face in this industry coming from Washington?
So it's fascinating is that those content issues, as Ted referenced the Supreme Court case in 2011, we won that case 7-2 and cemented the creative rights of the industry. So since then, the content issues have moved to the side. They're not completely gone. But if you look at today's environment, this is a digital, connected, online, worldwide industry. It's a huge business. It's $100 billion worldwide and growing, much faster than film, and music is shrinking. So you look at entertainment, it's the most vibrant form. The areas where we're seeing most acutely we're paying close attention, one is virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. These technologies are these extensions of the video game march of technology. If you look back at this industry, 10 years ago, I was here and mentioned and since then repeated that this industry is changing the interface between humans and machines. And what it's doing, it's not doing it in a university, it's not doing it in a government lab, it's doing it in the hands and in the homes of consumers all across the world. And it's done that from, you look at mobile today and virtual reality and all those extensions, it goes back to motion-based gameplay, it goes back to all of the different aspects of changes in how you enjoy the medium that have gone back for 30 years. So when we see these new technologies begin to be adopted in greater numbers, today we're in a couple million units. When you get to larger numbers, what we worry about is that the critics will come forward and say that somehow this is harming society. Much like comic books, cable TV, or video games went through that process, we could see those types of challenges. And we're ready for those. We're taking steps today to be ready. And then the second is taxation. We see digital taxation happening now as state and local governments look for new sources of revenue as industries like cable television flatline or start to decline on a revenue basis. They're looking for new sources of taxation, and they're looking at the video game industry and digital taxes in particular. Those would be the two areas I think we're most concerned about, Ted. So back to you, looking back at leadership, you built a tremendously successful company. The games we've already talked about. How do you nurture that type of growth and success?
Well, thank you for saying that. We always feel like we are trying to catch up to everybody else. I think most developers probably feel that way. It's a challenging industry. But one of the ways that has been one of the things that has worked for us well within Insomniac is that we actually do a lot of different types of games, from shooters to platformers to serious games to humorous games, stylized games, grounded games, and we work on all platforms. And you mentioned one of the games we have here, which is a VR game, Unspoken. We've gotten into that recently and have learned a lot of new lessons about design. But because we work on a wide variety of games, it actually helps keep the creative juices flowing. Because if any of you have worked on one franchise for a long period of time, and I think our first talk mentioned sequelitis, it can be challenging to keep the enthusiasm going. And when you have a team who's looking at each other going, okay, this is sequel number 7, what are we going to do to make this one different? It becomes tougher and tougher. So when we have different opportunities for people to jump into a diverse group of games, a wide range of games, it really helps quite a bit. At the same time, it's challenging from a brand perspective. We have a lot of times we wonder, what do fans think of Insomniac? What does our brand stand for? And because we do a wide variety of games, it's challenging for us to come up with one statement about what our games are. At the same time, though, I feel like that diversity of games helps us attract a diverse group of people at Insomniac. And I think that diverse group, that male, female, people from all different cultures, people with different backgrounds, really helps keep the innovation flowing and continues to help us move in a lot of different directions to make different types of content.
So follow on to that, how do you create that diversity of your team? How do you go about doing that, maintaining your eye on success, because you're a business, you have to be successful. How do you build that? And then how do you have it have a momentum of its own?
Well, one thing we don't do is we don't manufacture diversity. We don't have quotas. We don't say we have to hire a certain percentage of males or females or people from different countries. We have to be colorblind. We have to be gender blind. We have to hire the people we think are the most qualified for the position. But in doing that, we've ended up actually with a fairly diverse culture. People from all different countries, all different religions, different backgrounds. And that has helped us foster a community within Insomniac where everybody contributes. And one of the things that we say is great ideas come from anywhere. Anybody at the company, regardless of what your position is or what your seniority is, can come up with the next great solution to the problems that we have. However, doing that can often create chaos. When you say to everybody, please contribute, then you've got ideas coming in from everywhere. And we have 250 people at Insomniac, and we have large teams. And when you are trying to keep everybody moving in the same direction, it can be challenging. So I recall having the opportunity to go to Pixar a while back. And a friend of mine, I had a brother who worked there, and I went on a tour, and we ended up in this little theater. And the person who was taking us on the tour said, this is where every single day we have artists, riggers, concept artists, the director, audio guys show up and discuss what's going on in the film. And they, as you guys have probably heard before, it's called dailies. And it's something that movie studios do. It was foreign to me. And I thought about it and I thought, that'll never work for us. And then last year, when we were deep in production on one of our games, things were pretty chaotic. And we said, let's do dailies. So now, now we have groups of 5 people, sometimes 10, 15 people, getting together once, twice, 5 times a week and focusing on one particular feature or one particular mission. It could be one story point and asking, is this good? Is it bad? What can we do to solve this problem? And what's important about that is it gets us away from this culture where you're looking at email all day long, or you are using text to communicate. It forces people to get together face to face, people of very different backgrounds, people who are in different positions, and come to terms with what's good and bad, and then more importantly, work together to come up with the solutions that plague us in production all the time. And what we found is not only does it provide better solutions, it also fosters that sense of community, and it helps us bridge a lot of natural barriers that can occur when you have people coming from different countries working together or people who have completely different interests.
So let me ask you this just as a process matter. You see this idea at another company, you have 250 employees. How do you take this new idea and then get others to buy in and support this thing on a daily basis?
That's a great question. I think one thing we've learned is change is tough. People don't like change, and you have to take a stand, be brave, and say, this is the way we're going to do it. But at the same time, you can't be a dictator about it, right? Nobody likes the top-down approach. So part of it is explaining, communicating, being transparent with the pros and the cons of any approach, and hoping that people will buy in, and then getting feedback on it and evolving it. And we continue to evolve this process. So, but I want to jump to you real quick.
Right.
So I think for all of us in the industry, we often we look at what's going on in Washington. And one name pops to the top in our newsfeed every single day, and obviously it's Trump. As we struggle with continuing to build our own cultures and look ahead to where the industry is going, I often wonder, who are the real players? Who are the people who are leading behind the scenes versus the one name we see all the time?
Well, you mentioned diversity, you mentioned complexity. Those elements are very much present in how we represent this industry every day, not just in Washington, but in all the state capitals as well. So from our perspective at ESA, if you look back at the history of our industry and where the challenges came from, they weren't necessarily a direct assault from the President of the United States. In fact, that wasn't happening. It started in the states. So we've changed our strategy starting 10 years ago with a much heavier emphasis on engaging early and building champions and doing it on a nationwide basis. And so who these players are, they're attorneys general, they're governors, they're state legislators, and yes, there are members of Congress and there are senators and leaders within the White House. And you have to have an approach that's truthful and authentic to all of them, but where you're hitting targets that are very specific. And in this champion building exercise, I mean, I'll give you an example, is that the Attorney General from the state of Utah is an avid gamer. He's a total believer in this industry. He has a very open door to bringing the industry into the state of Utah, and he comes to E3 every year. And what's really great is he comes and he spends time at the show. You know, last 2 years he's Ubered from San Diego to come up to LA to go to the show and then Ubered back. And that's a degree of intense interest that he has in the industry. He goes as himself. He goes as a fan. He goes as someone who loves the medium, and then has a very important job to do. On other side of the political spectrum is Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. We recently had the board of the directors of ESA back in Washington. We were doing outreach on the Hill. She came by to visit us, and I really love introducing her. Many of you are probably familiar with her because she was on cable television every day as the head of the DNC. I introduce her not with all the complexity of Washington, but the way she approaches our industry is as a mom, It's that simple. That's where it starts. That's what she grounds herself in, and that's the prism through which she views how this industry engages with society. And she's, again, a big supporter. She has high standards for us to hit. We've continued to exceed them for some time. But it's those types of leaders that are throughout government that we cultivate relationships with. And one thing that we did 5 years ago was we launched basically the Video Game Caucus in partnership with Capitol Hill. And these are leaders in government, in the House of Representatives, bipartisan, who say, we believe in the industry. We want more of it. We want it to grow. We want to tell the story. And when people have misperceptions, we'd like to be a place where we can correct those. It's a much, much better conversation when you have a group of legislators, but it took time for us to get there and to build those champions. And so it's not just one voice in the White House. It's a complexity of voices in the agencies and throughout the states, and it's our job as ESA to have that conversation on a daily basis, 24/7, and make sure that they're as excited about what you're doing as you are. So that's it in a nutshell, on how that works.
That's great.
So back to you, Ted. When we look at these issues of diversity and inclusion, we're certainly at ESA, we're focused on those very intensely. We work with higher education, the Higher Education Video Game Alliance. Some of you in the room may be familiar with them. We work with them to make sure we're understanding where are we now when it comes to diversity, but where we're going. When you look at this, you've talked about it inside your company. Do you see an outside responsibility, something that's bigger than just your company?
Well, I think the obvious answer is yes. I mean, all of us who are at this conference and people who go, when we go to IGDA talks, et cetera, we're interested in helping the industry grow and become more diverse and more inclusive. But practically it's difficult. For those of us who are making games, we tend to get very heads down and focused on production, and we have the best of intentions, but we don't always have the time or even the ability to make a difference outside. And so for us at Insomniac, we've done a couple things. We've focused on a couple of causes that we think are really important. One is women in games. We believe that there is definitely a gender disparity in games, and we need to do whatever we can to encourage more women and girls to get into games. And so we've sponsored, we've supported the Women in Gaming International website for a year. We've had Girls Make Games come and make games at Insomniac. We're on IGDA diversity panels. We work with the Academy to mentor STEM, girls who want to get into STEM sciences. And so that's, for us, one way that we can make a difference. But the other way, and I think all companies can do this, is we will speak out on things that we think are important. And we recently released a video when the immigration ban was announced by the executive branch, where we said, we don't believe this is right. We believe in inclusion. Inclusion for us is about accepting people of different cultural backgrounds, gender identities, different races, and providing a space where one can safely create. We don't want to do what we believe Washington often does, which is exclude. And we had all Insomniacs who believed in this standing together and making a statement. And it was interesting because we got a wide variety of responses from people. In particular, I was surprised at the amount of negative responses I got. I got a lot of people who were tweeting me or posting and saying, stay out of politics and just make games. And I found that was pretty ironic because games are all about self-expression. What we do is we put ourselves out there with the stories that we tell and the themes that we have, and we are ultimately expressing ourselves. So why shouldn't we why should we not express what we feel is right and wrong politically? But for me personally, this is really important because I love America. I love what we stand for in terms of freedom and opportunity. At the same time, I and a lot of Insomniacs believe that we need to keep America safe. But I think we can absolutely do that without devolving into a racist, xenophobic, and culturally biased society.
How about a round of applause for Ted in that video? And we couldn't be more appreciative, Ted, of your leadership on the industry level, because when your voice is so clear and when you bring the faces and voices of your team members, which show your commitment to exactly what you're speaking about, you elevate the craft of the industry, you elevate the meaning behind the words that we speak as the leaders in Washington, and it has an impact. And you've seen that impact, and over time, when we engage with more and more leaders, we end up in the right place. And what I would close with is we started with Ted sharing his thoughts and his passion around the First Amendment, right of freedom of speech, free expression. the power of this industry, that fundamentally that's what drives it. And to start there in 2005 and to end with your team approach to that same concept, now 250 strong. We couldn't be more appreciative of ESA, and everybody in this room should be appreciative of Ted Price. Ted, thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for all you do. Seriously.
And I believe our time is up.
Yeah.
And we'll stay on schedule.
And
Maybe not. We could keep
stare at
going.
you, Dean. Hey, Dean. How's it going? All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks.